we have all this greed. We have all of these wealthy corporate interests that are interfering with something that is sacred. And that is the experience that we have as fans, the experience that we have as moviegoers, as, concert goers. That is what makes us human. And you have corporations and the wealthy trying to sell our humanity back to us. Welcome to The Fair Fight, a show for you and your fight against corporate power. I'm Max Miller, an antitrust attorney, a corporate skeptic, and a prairie populist. And joining me, former FTC Commissioner Alvaro Bedoya, a man who took on corporate power for you, and the president fired him for it.
Every day we're told that the defining fight of our lives is Democrat versus Republican. We're told to worry about the left versus the right. Max and me are a lot more worried about the money at the top versus all of us underneath. And we think that needs to be a fair fight. So we're taking your questions, sharing your stories, and getting you answers about your rights in this economy.
So put on those boxing gloves, tighten up those laces, and enter the arena, because it's time to join the fair fight. Welcome, everyone, to the Fair Fight podcast with Alvaro and Max. Today is June 12th. And Alvaro, how are you doing this week?
All right. I just got back from Los Angeles. I was there for 6 days, which is a lot of days to not be at home. So it was definitely less swampy and roasty than DC is. But now I'm back. And no longer, in Los Angeles.
That's why everybody moves to Southern California, right?
Like at the beach. That is exactly why everyone moves to Southern California. It was very every day. It's like the perfect temperature when you wake up, and when you're going to bed, it's like this nice cold breeze, and you're like, all right, I see the appeal. Yeah.
Iowa has been ridiculously muggy for the past few days and very warm, and then we had this tremendous torrential downpour. And it's now it's like we're Southern California, it's 70 degrees and beautiful. Yeah, it's one nice thing about storms, right? It's the shift from the hot to the cold. And but anyway, we have a lot of fun things to talk about today, I think.
Yes, we
and
do.
It's all relevant. We're going to talk about your trip to LA. I wanted to table set just for a few minutes here before we talk about the Main Street First, the merger conference that you've been involved in addressing the Paramount WBD merger. When I think about movies and TV, what we're essentially talking about is the meaning of being a human. Right. And it's amazing how corporations have used this term content, right? Content creation. What that really says to me is that the greedy interests of our society want to commoditize meaning making. And I've talked about this before in the music context, right?
Yeah.
How you have companies like Ticketmaster who basically try to insert themselves between artists and the art that they make and the humans who want to consume it. Because when I think about what content is, right, it's really our search for meaning as humans. We tell stories. And this week has been
art in particular, I think. Art, with art and television and film in particular, it's how we explain ourselves, how we talk about our hopes and dreams. And so I absolutely agree with that.
And when I think we're going to talk a lot, I think about the movie making context here and that content. But I want to talk about sports for a little bit, because I think they're related, right? It's what we do to try to pass the time, but what we're doing is trying to find meaning. And this week was wonderful and horrible for sports all at the same time. And for those who aren't big sports fans like I am, I just want to kind of tell you, it's like this is an amazing week for sports. We have the NBA Finals going on. The NBA Finals have had um, ratings, viewership that like parallels the 1990s. I was a huge Bulls fan as a kid, the Michael Jordan era. And this Knicks Spurs series is getting the same attention that the NBA hasn't seen since the 1990s. We also have the World Cup starting. Mexico, Canada, the United States are hosting the World Cup, one of the biggest sporting events in the entire world. It's starting this week. We have the College World Series starting. The WNBA is getting going. This is a beautiful time for sports.
Yes.
And what I want to just point out about sports is it tells the same stories that movies do. Think about how there's always villains and heroes in sports. You got the agony of defeat and the joy of victory that comes with it. And people tune in because they want to feel that emotion. Um, I've always been a huge soccer fan. And so I was really excited about the start of the World Cup. But in the lead up to it, it's been some of the most disgusting news stories coming out of it.
Yeah.
And the vast majority of this relates to the greed of corporations who are inserting themselves into that sacred transaction, which is the athlete, an artist, doing their craft, right? Creating meaning, through sport and the fans who want to watch it. So this year of the World Cup was different than any other previous World Cup because FIFA had control of the tickets. And what we've seen is just this fantastic control over the distribution of tickets, and it's led to inflated ticket prices. I want to, make sure that Trong Fan is like a business writer, and he laid out just a lot of the statistics of this on Twitter. And the ticket prices for this World Cup were 2 times that of Qatar in 2022.
Is that right? And also, I also didn't realize that FIFA controlled the tickets for the first time. Has it not been that way for the prior World Cups?
No, before they would get like a cut of like the advertising and all of that, right? But that the ticket prices would be controlled by the venues and there was I think maybe the host nation too had some. I don't know the specifics of it, but this is the big news, that this was the first time that FIFA was able to control it. They've engaged in something called dynamic pricing. New York and New Jersey have investigated FIFA. They've sent subpoenas to them to explain how they are actually setting their ticket prices. But anyway, so I said 2 times the Qatari World Cup, which was just 4 years ago. But if you go back to 1994, the last time the World Cup was in the United States, it is 4 times the ticket prices of 1994 when adjusted for inflation.
Yeah.
Now, this greed, what has it accomplished? Empty stadiums. Yesterday, we had the first 2 games of the World Cup in Mexico City. I mean, the Mexico City one, Mexico was playing in, so that one was full. But they had in Guadalajara, they had South Korea and Czechia now? Which is the old Czech Republic?
The Czech Republic?
But
so you're talking to the wrong guy. I still occasionally call it Czechoslovakia like an idiot.
Yeah, but I think it's called Czechia, at least in the World Cup now. And so anyway, that game, South Korea, that's not a host nation game that's being played. Like, they didn't even sell out the stadium. And the images from the stadium, it was like half the seats were empty.
Wow.
Right? They had sold some of the tickets. One of the things that's happening is the secondary market tickets are less than the primary ticket prices.
What is that? I saw an economist online posting about this. What does that mean? What does that suggest?
It means that they are pricing above the demand level, right? But I think there's also a huge problem with all the political background that is going on too, which is that people are scared. Like, visas to the United States have been denied. When you think about the demand, a lot of that was coming from foreign countries that were going to travel.
World Cup. Yeah.
And, we have a president who's intent upon scaring off the world from coming to the United States. So but one step further, right? So then a lot of people are saying, like, kind of F you, we're not going to play your ticket games. We're going to watch on TV.
Yeah.
FIFA implemented something this World Cup, which was cooling breaks, which, given global warming and rising temperatures, kind of makes sense for the players' benefit. But the real reason they're doing it is to get in more advertising. So Fox Sports is the one carrying the World Cup, and they were missing action of the game to run advertising. So they'd cut away for like basically they're trying to create TV breaks like they do in, American football and other sports. And fans are pissed off, as they should be. Why? Because a corporation is inserting itself between the meaning that happens between a fan and the athletes. So absolutely absurd. Then we had something beautiful happen on Wednesday night, which was game
Oh,
4
can
of the
can we
NBA
talk about
Finals.
the World Cup
Go,
before you go to game
please,
4?
yeah,
Okay.
before I move, yeah.
So I'm with you on everything other than the cooling breaks. So but I want to talk about the everything in a quick beat. So the Brazilians, I'm pretty sure in their league soccer play in quarters. I also believe that
I didn't know that.
I'm pretty sure my brother will correct me, but so I'm pretty sure they play in quarters. They also, my understanding is that I think Brazil, perhaps elsewhere, they do penalties different. They don't they have a thing where they stack a goalie versus maybe a goalie and a defender versus a striker, and like that is how they do like final. Maybe this is just from the
Well,
recesses
this
of
is
my
not standard
imagination.
FIFA rules, man. This sounds
Oh, no,
like
no,
it
no.
sounds like
It's not
Australian
remotely.
rules football.
No, yeah, not remotely standard FIFA rules. The quarters, though, is I think the innovation. So I don't mind the players getting more rest and look, like advertising is how we pay for this stuff, and so that I don't
Yeah,
mind.
but
Everything else.
there's a difference between this and this is, I am sick and tired of people acting like this wouldn't happen without the profit motivation. Right? This will
Well,
happen no matter what, right? People will find a way. And really all you have to do is break even. Right? Because there's enough passion of people wanting to do this, right? That even if they just broke even and had their costs covered, like the
right.
event would still happen.
Yeah.
What
Max,
this
I'm trying to
is,
agree with you. I'm trying to agree
okay.
with you. I'm just saying, like, I don't care if, like, I want players to get some rest, and I lived through some of those cutaways where they would cut away to ads, and you'd come back and they just score a goal, and it sucked.
Yeah.
And so, but everything else you said, I agree with completely. And you and I have talked about how, a song, whether it's a Willie Nelson song or a Bruce Springsteen song or a Beyonce song, does more for mental health for people, than, an hour of therapy or whatever, because it is the most basic way that people can emote. And I think sports are part of that. I remember to this day, the 1994 World Cup, I watched every single game. And you're about to talk
Remember the
about
Colombia
game 4.
own goal against the United States?
So that was the dark part. But the
That's
beautiful
very good.
part for me and my brother was watching the Brazil versus Netherlands semifinal, where it was just neck and neck and neck. And then Branco scored a goal from like basically the halfway line, basically midfield, just a rocket. And I remember to this day, I was probably I was 12, just like I was in Ecuador at the time visiting my dad, just sticking my head out the window and just screaming at the top of my lungs. And everybody else was doing the same thing. So no, this is a form of art. Absolutely. It is what gives people joy, and to relentlessly squeeze dollars out of it like it's some kind of gold mine is disgusting.
Well, they understand, and this is something about the experience it's priceless. It's much more valuable than
Absolutely.
money. Recently,
Yeah.
Amanda started getting into basketball, and she's never been a sports person, but I'm so into sports. And it was when the Gators won the national championship that she was like, "God, basketball is a really cool sport." So we have been watching the Knicks and the Spurs, and she told me that the last 2 seconds of the Spurs, or just so people know, basically the Spurs were up by 29 points at one point in time. The Knicks came back. They won it in the final minute. It was one of the most amazing comebacks, one of the most amazing, games that has ever been played.
Yeah.
And Amanda Brunson took a 3-point that looked like it was a stupid shot to take with, time ticking down. It was like 5 seconds left. Takes this 3-point shot, shanks it, hits the rim, bounces out, and OG Anunoby crashes the board and tips it in just the most dramatic, incredible fashion that you could possibly imagine. And Amanda said, like, in those 3 seconds, she felt every range of human emotion. She was, we were cheering on the Knicks, and it's that nothing makes you feel more like a human
Yeah.
than when you like experience that.
Yeah.
And I cannot get over the fact that the get-in price for tickets was around $10,000
Are you
for that game.
no. Are
I
you
am not kidding
serious?
you. The floor seats were hundreds of thousands of dollars. And, the crowd is just filled with celebrities and the oligarchy. And,
Wow.
yes, there were efforts made to try to get people in. I think they gave away to underprivileged kids like 250 tickets for the game and all that. But, Dolan, who is the guy who runs
Right.
the Knicks,
Yeah.
right? His greed is apparent. And he brought politics into it. He invited Trump to show up for game 3. Trump was booed mercilessly by the Madison Square Garden crowd in game 3. It basically just sucked all the joy. Dolan and Mamdani, of course, he's not a Mamdani supporter because Mamdani is trying to hold billionaires like him accountable.
Yeah.
Right. And so he started all this beef with
With
Mamdani.
with him and the police commissioner Jessica Tisch,
Yeah.
who's like not like a Mamdani stalwart. She's like the
No.
pre-existing police commissioner. That
Well,
is
the
also a
mother.
classmate of mine from college.
Oh, no
but,
kidding. Oh, that's
yeah,
great.
yeah,
That's
yeah, yeah. Jesse Tisch, we called her.
But that's
But yeah, no, she's
but
not
it
like
was
a
it was all
Mamdani
over.
loyalist. Yeah,
It was all over, a license for the party that was supposed to happen outside. Because, look, when the ticket prices are that high and the oligarchy is the only group that can go and see this human meaning making event, right? The
Yeah.
best thing that we have is to get it on TV. And, people still want to be together. Well, they were going to do like a watch party outside, and they applied for a license that was between 500 and 999 people. And it was granted by the city administration. And then he said that they wouldn't let them have more than 1,000 people, so he canceled the event completely. Why did the motherfucker cancel the event? Probably because it was going to cost him money, and he decided it wasn't worth it, but then he thought he could get some political jabs in on Mamdani. But to Mamdani's credit, right, he created all of these other avenues to be able to watch it. He put it on the transportation videos that they have, the little screens. But what I want to point out here is that we have all this greed. We have all of these wealthy corporate interests that are interfering with something that is sacred. And that is the experience that we have as fans, the experience that we have as moviegoers, as, concert goers. That is what makes us human. And you have corporations and the wealthy trying to sell our humanity back to us. And I think it's time for people to really rebel against this, to figure out to me, I think it is morally right to steal content, from these corporations that put it all behind paywalls. Because if they're trying to take our humanity, if they're trying to sell our humanity back to us, we as humans have the right to take it back from them. But anyway, that's my rant. I wanted to bring it up because I think it relates so much to what you've been working on with the Paramount merger.
Well, let's get to that in a second. I thought that look, I don't know about the stealing part, but I will say that I think you said it really well when you said they're trying to sell our humanity back to us. And what this reminds me of is, I'm sure you've been tracking what's happening with private equity and kids sports and kids and teens, little leagues and soccer and all that, where basically private equity is buying up the brands and the organizations. And I could be wrong, but I think Senator Chris Murphy was reprimanded, or maybe one of his constituents was in Connecticut, for recording their kids' game. And I think the private equity owned league was no, we have the exclusive right to record your child's sporting event. And it just tells you, watching your kid play sports is one of the basic joys of parenting, and the idea that we would commoditize that. It's just it's something out of like Brazil, or I mean, it's Brazil as in like the movie, the Terry Gilliam movie.
I was going to
It's
say I was a
something
little
out of
bit
some.
lost. I was a little
Yeah,
bit
no, no,
lost
no.
about like what
The
the
Brazilians
Brazilians
love
had to
their
do.
sports, and no, the Brazilians would never do this. But no, it's something out of some dystopian, future, which I guess it isn't the future; it's today. But yeah, the idea you would bar a mom or a dad from like taping their kids, soccer game is it's some dystopian
Well, well, think about what it really is saying. It's saying we own your
bananas
child.
stuff.
We own your child and what they're doing.
Hmm.
Like we have the
I think your
exclusive right to.
formulation of selling your humanity back to you, I like that. I like that. That's the one I want to noodle on. Is that what you said? They're
Yeah.
selling
No, it's
your
like
humanity
because
back to you.
it's there's nothing more human than that transaction between
Yeah.
art, athlete, artist, the art and the fan, right? There's
Yeah.
nothing more human than that meaning.
Yeah.
And they have inserted themselves to basically sell that humanity to us.
Yeah. I hear you. No, I think that you're onto something. So
Should write an article on it.
you should write an article on it. You should
Yeah.
absolutely do that, man. So should we talk about Paramount?
I would love to. That was the main purpose today. This was just my prelim rant that ties it more to my
I think some
interest.
people come for the rants. Yeah. So we are going to talk about the series of visits that I'm paying together with my team at the American Economic Liberties Project, along with this extraordinary coalition, including the Future Film Coalition, the Democracy Defenders Action, Committee for the First Amendment, and the Writers Guild of America, along with Free Press, to 3 cities, to Los Angeles, New York this Saturday, and Atlanta on Tuesday. And what are we doing, and why do I want to talk about it? So to the extent people know about the Paramount, let me do the top line of the Paramount Warner Brothers merger. We did a very big, a long episode on this earlier, but I don't want to assume everyone's watched it. In a nutshell, you have Paramount Skydance, which is owned by David Ellison, trying to buy Warner Brothers Discovery, which is the home not just of CNN, but also HBO and a panoply of other channels. If this merger goes through, this will give one family control not just over CBS and CBS News, but also 60 Minutes. You've seen what's happened to that property, the flagship, probably American journalistic institution. I would put them far ahead of the New York Times in terms of their reporting. They will also own CNN, HBO, and the family also has a key stake in TikTok. Now, what do I want to talk about in these visits? Why are we doing these visits? We're doing these visits because something is getting lost in the conversations around this merger. Because most of it is getting framed as like left versus right, as like Democrat versus Republican. Obviously, the Ellison family is very closely aligned with President Trump. They are very close allies of the president. Secretary of War Pete Hegseth has openly said at a press conference he can't wait for CNN to be owned by the Ellisons. Amazing statement. But it's not just that. It's not just left versus right. It's also censorship. So Scott Pelley, Sharon Alfonsi, Cecilia Vega, all these, generation-defining journalists were just pushed out of 60 Minutes. The broader context is that Bari Weiss, the censor that Mr. Ellison has installed at Paramount to oversee CBS and all the CBS properties, shelved an episode about that weird torture prison down in El Salvador. There's all sorts of interference alleged by Pelley in, trying to tone down stories and their criticism of the president. So when people hear about the merger, they hear about like, liberals versus conservatives, or Democrats versus Republicans, or maybe they think about censorship, right? Or maybe they're aware of this extraordinary letter signed by 5,500 leaders in the film and television industry calling for the merger to be blocked. And yet the funny thing about coverage of the letter is maybe not funny, it's to be expected. Coverage of it is really focused on some of the most famous signers of that letter, which includes some folks that I'm a big fan of, like Mark Ruffalo, Noah Wyle, Kristen Stewart, John Leguizamo. But it's kind of become this caricature coverage of the Paramount Warner Brothers merger. It's like Hollywood millionaires versus MAGA billionaires. And I am really, really worried that it's leaving out a huge problem, which is that this merger will result in the layoffs of thousands and thousands of people who work in the film and television industry, who are overwhelmingly blue-collar workers with blue-collar jobs that, because a lot of them are unionized, actually give them a pass to the middle class. And also, it's going to result in hundreds of businesses closing their doors, because around every one of those studios, you have this whole ecosystem of businesses that actually do post-production, actually do, color correction, sound, that do costumes, prop houses, that do catering, that are electricians, that are plumbers, that are provide, camera operators, etc., sound stages. We're not talking about that. And to the degree that we're talking about it in Los Angeles. We're not talking about it in New York City. We're not talking about it in Jersey City. We're not even talking about it in Atlanta, Savannah, Miami, which are all the homes of all sorts of Warner Brothers and Discovery content and shows and film. And so with this tour, our goal is to bring that to light, to give the people in this industry who maybe are a camera operator, maybe are a working actor, maybe are a working writer, maybe are own a post-production company, or they're an electrician, etc., a chance to speak their piece about this, to talk about what the merger will mean to them. Hence, Main Street versus the merger, not, left versus right, not Hollywood millionaires versus MAGA millionaires, Main Street versus the merger. And so I thought about over a half hour, I could just share some of the highlights of our event in Los Angeles. Maybe starting with this video from one of the kind of featured speakers we had there, writer and actor and comedian and TV host Adam Conover.
I've loved this guy for a long time, right?
Yeah.
Like, he's an intellectual, but he's a comedian, right? So he knows how to make people laugh. And he had this show that was on True TV many years ago, which was one of my favorite shows ever made, which was Adam Ruins Everything. And he'd just take any topic, right, that we think we know something about, right, that we have all of these like preconceived ideas of like what it's about, and he just eviscerates it with background research on how things came to be, and just demonstrates how awful it is. So if you get a chance, check out Adam Ruins Everything. But yes, Adam Conover.
So
love that guy.
Why don't we start with a clip from Adam that, from the top of the town hall that talks about what happened to Adam Ruins Everything.
They had an Adam Ruins Everything poster in their corporate office, and someone had scribbled over it with a Sharpie and written AT&T ruins everything. I was radicalized about this issue because I lived it. I created a show called Adam Ruins Everything that was killed because of the AT&T Time Warner merger. When we pitched that show, we pitched it to TNT, TBS, True TV, Comedy Central, Discovery. True TV bought the show because they, at the time, had a mandate to compete with Comedy Central. They bought the show. We then shot the show for 4 to 5 years around Los Angeles. We employed about 100 people. So they put True TV, TNT, and TBS, formerly separate networks, under one manager. That manager called me up, said, we're canceling the show. That was 2 mergers ago. After the next merger, that guy was fired. They put all of that under HBO Max. True TV, TNT, TBS, Comedy Central no longer exist. The companies no longer make the kind of content that I make, and if I were to make it, they wouldn't allow me to shoot it in Los Angeles because the corner cutting has gotten so severe that they would make me shoot it somewhere else.
So, so basically, he lays out how before the merger, right now, before this merger goes through, if it goes through, and we'll talk about that in a moment, we are already in this like weird, like almost apocalyptic, hellscape of merger after merger after merger, where some of the most interesting television and film has been shelved. And by the way, like, it wasn't just so that he was talking about AT&T's acquisition of Time Warner. Like you heard at the top, you say, Max, it's Warner Brothers Discovery. Like it has gone, then it was Time Warner AOL, then it wasn't Time Warner AOL. He's just talking about what one merger did to his show. And it's not just one merger. It's AT&T Time Warner, it's Fox Disney, it's Amazon MGM, it's Skydance's acquisition of Paramount. Like it's like a cartoon where each of the fish just gobbles each other up. And now there's just like 4 really fat fish that like don't go anywhere interesting because they're so weighed down by the debt they have to service and these weird C-suite executives at the top who are super risk averse. And so already we're dealing with a landscape that's like a moonscape of disasters produced by these mergers.
I went ahead and put in the chat one of my favorite Adam Ruins Everything, which is on why marijuana is illegal in the United States. But I'm sorry, I've got my dog barking. I don't know if that's coming through on the audio.
He's pissed. He should be pissed.
Yeah, he's pissed about the way that our content is being ruined by corporate mergers. But it's like it's amazing because you need capital, right, to make a show like Adam Ruins Everything. I can't remember if it was this one or another part of his talk where he talked about employing 100 people, or so, right? That costs money. And he talked about the importance of cost to like where you can actually shoot the show, whether it's in LA or being forced to shoot elsewhere. But what is disgusting is that the amount of money it costs to produce something is far less than the profits that these companies are trying to make. And that's when you have mergers, when you have capital concentration, they're not really interested in covering the costs of the show. I mean, they will do it, right? But they want to increase their profit margins. And that's why they will take good content and keep it away from, eyes through the channels that exist, right? Because they can't make as much profit as they want to make on it.
There was this part of Adam, laying all this stuff out where he talked about how there were like 100 people who were helping make the show in the background, selling ads, special effects, post-production, production. And all those folks were out of jobs. And one of the most striking moments, we won't share the video, I can just describe it here, was from a writer who stood up. And she said, I actually got laid off from the last David Ellison acquisition. I got laid off when Skydance, the Ellison's company, bought Warner Brothers Discovery. I think it was for like $8 billion or $9 billion. She said, Max, I haven't paid rent for May, right? It's June, it was like June 6th, right? She's like, I haven't paid rent for May. My severance has run out. My unemployment is about to run out. But what's wild, Max, is she says, but don't feel sorry for me because honestly, my life now is better than it would have been had I stayed because they treated us so badly. They treated us like garbage. She didn't say the word garbage, but that's what she was saying. And Max, so look, I mean, one of the things, like I can't predict what's going to happen, granularly after this acquisition, but I can tell you what happened the last time around and how it compares to this time around. The last time around, it was $8 billion, the acquisition. This acquisition is $110 billion. After the last acquisition, right before they changed hands, 800 people got laid off. Then 1,000 people got laid off. Then 1,600 people got laid off. So I did the thing efficiencies, yeah, super efficient, right? And quote unquote efficient. Mm-hmm. So then I went on Reddit, Max. I went on Reddit to see how these folks talked about what happened. I found someone talking about how their, colleague of 20 years just got canned. I found someone talking about how her entire division, herself included, got laid off, or themselves included, got laid off and shipped to Argentina. Hilarious, not hilariously, but darkly, it sounds like the people in South America were then laid off in that last round of 1,600 cuts. Max, there was a woman who said, I got laid off when I was 7 months pregnant. And there was another person who said, who in reply to that person, the 7 months pregnant lady says, I got fired on my baby's due date during maternity leave. Okay? This is what quote unquote efficiencies and quote unquote realizing synergies means.
It's all greed.
I agree with you. That's exactly what it is. And it is, I think one of the things that happens when you spend too much time in Washington or in the law or in policy is that we start using words like efficiencies and synergies, and we start using percents, and no one wakes up. What does a cent look like, right? Like what is 37%? What does that look like? People, I mean, look at the studies, like people actually have a hard time visualizing in their head something over like 6 or something like that. It's like 3, 5, and many, and so when you're like 27% of this and that, people can't picture it. But that's why I think it's so important to actually read those things on Reddit, because everyone can picture a mom getting laid off on her due date during maternity leave. Okay. But it gets worse, Max, because that, $8 billion merger, 13 times the size merger. That's the amount of money they're paying. They're going to load this company down with $78 billion in debt. The thing about debt is that it's not a gift. The thing about debt is you got to pay interest and repay the principal. And so they're...
And isn't part of that debt from foreign countries?
Yes. So the Saudi Arabian Sovereign Wealth Fund, I believe Qatari...
And you know that the Saudi Arabians love free expression, right?
And you can tell because according to American intelligence, the Crown Prince, Mohammed bin Salman, was responsible for the murder of Washington Post journalist Jamal Khashoggi. So that's
exercising
how much
his freedom. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. His First Amendment freedom in our country. And so the Saudi money is up in there. There's money from other, Middle Eastern states like Qatar and UAE, I believe. But like, even setting that aside, you got to pay for that debt, right?
Yeah.
And last time around, they wanted to quote unquote realize $3 billion in quote unquote synergies. Now they want to quote unquote realize $6 billion in synergies. And Max, they claim they're going to produce more films combining those legacy studios of Paramount, Warner Brothers than they ever have before. So just get that right. We're going to take on $78 billion. We're going to pay more than anyone ever has before for a company. We're going to take on $78 billion in debt. And we are going to...
You gotta produce a lot of slop to hold that promise. A lot of AI-generated slop. Of course, we're finding out that AI now costs more than actual human beings, so it's not like they're going to be able to have cost savings by generating it through AI.
So I just think it's going to be a disaster for the people who work in this industry, and like anyone who's like, ooh, like Hollywood liberal actors are about to get laid off. Like
that's not who this is.
Number one, screw you. Relishing in someone else's misfortune is wrong and immoral. But
it's
secondly,
definitely not Christian of you.
You need to understand that most people who work in film and television work blue collar jobs, and it is only by virtue of the unionization of these industries that they're middle class jobs. And so these are good, middle class jobs that are about to be kicked to the curb. But, at some point, a writer stood up and she says, hey, this is coming for you too. So let's play that one.
I'm here to tell you that if this merger moves forward, this is going to screw you over too. You will laugh less. You will have less great TV shows and movies to bond with your grandma and your weird coworkers over. You probably already noticed that while you can still find an excellent prestige drama, you're rewatching Friends and The Office over and over again. Because those classic meat and potato shows do not live in a landscape without competition. The AT&T merger a few years ago killed so many of the places that we could pitch the shows and movies you love, and this merger will kill so many more. You deserved weird, unique, thoughtful TV and movies that create a sense of cultural community that bonds you with your neighbors and friends.
Humanity.
We want to make those shows and movies for you. As a consumer, you deserve better. Help us block this merger to get it.
And Max, could we just go to the next one, the rom-com writer, quickly to just set out what these writers are saying?
Us writers who make our living pitching stories and writing stories that we hope to sell, when there's one less buyer, and there have been one less buyer almost every year for the past decade, MGM to Amazon and Fox to Disney, when those go away, it is one less person in the back of your mind you think might buy the story you're writing. And you have to censor your ideas to be more mainstream or more broad. And I'm a straight white guy who writes rom-coms. I don't have a lot of radical or crazy or even fresh ideas. And so if I'm finding myself writing things in a way that is narrowing the originality, we're in a terrible situation.
So these guys are pointing out, like, you may not track what happens in Hollywood, but just like Adam Conover explained, just like these writers explained, there used to be this whole ecosystem of buyers for shows. And with every one of these mergers, there's one less buyer. And what that means is your interesting, experimental, edgy comedy show, has to just appeal to a broader and broader and broader audience. And look, all of us know the best comedy is comedy that pushes at the edges. Comedy that makes you a little bit uncomfortable, but recognizes some universal human truth, and it's comedy that takes risks. And these writers are pointing out, go ahead.
No. I just want to say recently I introduced my boy to an old Coen Brothers film, Raising Arizona. And at the beginning of that film, they basically plot they're going to go steal a baby. And my son looked at me and he's like, "What? It's a show about kidnapping?" But then he watched it and he goes, "That was the greatest movie I've ever seen." But it's because of that. It was about truth that movie, but it was edgy. Think about that. The plot was a couple kidnapping a child, and making them the heroes at the center of the story. And that was edgy. But it only happened because you had competitive markets where something like that could get made and get to the people.
It's really funny, Max, is for whatever reason, my parents in 1988 also showed me that movie.
That's about when I watched it too.
Yeah. And looking back, I've since seen Raising Arizona and be like, what are you guys doing? But they did, because it was hilarious. It was complete. It was unlike anything else. And I mean, Nicolas Cage just crushed. It was like, what was his line? Her womb was a rocky wasteland where my seed could find no purchase.
No, could find. That's you got it perfectly, man.
Yeah, where my seed could find no purchase. It was anyway. So go ahead.
Yeah, and it's about that independence that you're talking about, right? These writers having this independence and then letting the quality of what they write be purchased by competing distribution centers.
That's right. And so we're not just going to see layoffs. We're also going to, and we're already witnessing this. I mean, I don't know if this has happened to you, Max, but 5 years ago, 4 years ago, in the thick of the pandemic, you get on and streaming was bananas. There was so much variety, so many different shows. And look, these things ebb and flow naturally, right? And I do think that was a high point, and there was a course correction where, because everyone was home watching TV, suddenly people were out in the street again, and that shifted. But I go online we have most of the streamers we're very lucky enough to be able to pay for. We also have kids that mean we need Paw Patrol is here and that's there. And I often go online and I'm like, man, I can't find anything to watch that's doesn't seem to be designed to be second screen. Basically put it on in the background while you surf the internet. So, but I want to take one last beat here to point out, but go ahead.
I want to offer a bit of hope here, which is I think that as the cost of distribution goes down because of avenues like YouTube, look, one of the most amazing pieces of content that I've seen recently
Yeah.
is The Amazing Digital Circus. And are you familiar
Ooh,
with this?
I'm gonna write
My
that down.
my eldest child introduced me to it. I actually took them recently to on June 4th, they did like the finale of it. But
Uh-huh.
this all got started on YouTube. It's an independent production company. It's animated, right? And they created the whole basic story is about human beings being trapped by an AI overlord. It's
Oh,
based
Lord.
upon a 1960s sci-fi article
Yeah.
or short story, and it's very creative. It's very meaningful, very impactful.
Yeah.
I've only seen a few of the episodes, but I'm impressed that my kid is drawn to it. But
Yeah.
what I was impressed with was that it got created on YouTube. That was how it was
Mm.
originally distributed, and then Netflix picked it up,
Yep.
right? So, I mean, look, there
No,
there
no,
may
yeah,
be some there
we
may be
will.
some hope, but
Yes,
it's
there absolutely is hope, and I will end on that. I pretty promise, pinky promise. I'm going to end on a note of hope, but I think people need to understand what's at stake here. So,
yeah,
lastly, I want to talk about the impact on small business, and I'm going to cut to our friends in Iowa for a quick second, and then I want to talk about documentary. So you go over to our farmer friends in Iowa, whether that's Josh Mansky, Lance Lilbridge, Aaron Lehman, and farmers are focused on inputs and the price of inputs and outputs and the markets for those outputs, the buyers for those outputs. And what we've talked about at length on the show is how both of those are constraining dramatically. So there used to be a dozen places to buy your seed, now there's two. There used to be 3-4 places to book your fertilizer, now there's really two. There used to be 4 places to sell your cattle and process it. Now, usually in a given region, there is one place. The price they offer is the price you take. It's often so far away from you that the cattle die in the heat of the drive. And when some calamity befalls us like COVID and, the meat packing plant has to shut down, you have to euthanize your cattle because as the calves get older and mature, there is no room to put them. Okay, so hold that thought of the inputs consolidating and the buyers consolidating. And let's do this next video of Matt Radecki. And Matt
okay.
Radecki, by the way, has worked on documentaries like 20 Feet from Stardom, Icarus about Lance Armstrong, and Navalny. Okay, this is a heavy-hitting post-production studio owner.
When free market capitalism with no regulation is out of control, it's no different than a director who has no producers or editors keeping them in line. And we've all seen those films. And I'm the co-founder of post-production facility in Los Angeles. We're a small business. We pay taxes, we buy millions of hard drives. When an auto factory shuts down, the damage is not just to the workers, it's the constellation of small businesses, the people to make the screws, the wiper blades, the schools, the restaurants, the bars where the workers go to. We've survived for 22 years, but this is the biggest thing that we've faced. Many of the places we work with are closed. Showtime, MTV Films, and they're gone, and they're never coming back. And we don't want to see that happen to HBO or CNN Films because they make great projects, including Navalny. We want to stop this merger.
So listen to what he just said. This is a guy who's worked on some of the most important documentaries of our time, including Icarus, which is about basically dethroning what we thought was perhaps the greatest American sportsman of our generation, Lance Armstrong, and Navalny, which is about this opposition leader against Vladimir Putin. And what he's pointing out is we used to have all these other places to bid. Showtime, MTV Films. He didn't mention it, but there's also PBS and POV, which are publicly financed. Showtime is gone. MTV Films is gone. Public funding has been basically cut out. The two main buyers of hard-hitting documentary are now CNN and HBO. Now, you might say, what about Netflix? Netflix mostly buys your documentary if it's about a celebrity, if it's about crime, or if it's about a cult. Okay? So those critical, holding a middle finger up to power documentaries, those are bought by CNN and HBO. And if this merger goes through, those will be owned by Paramount. Here's something else, though, Max, that my colleague Marge Safinia raised from the Feature Film Coalition. She pointed out that there are 4 great TV news archives in our country: ABC, NBC, CBS, and CNN. And of all those, CNN is obviously the only full-time news channel. They have 45 years of the most detailed TV news archives of the entire country. And if this merger goes through, two of those four archives, including the most detailed historical footage archive in our country, will be owned by one company. And so remember that farmer who suddenly has two places to buy their seeds and one place to process their cattle? That is the reality we are hurtling towards. And by the way, when you put the farmers and the film people in the same room, they see it. They recognize it. Okay. And so this seemingly narrow Hollywood fight is so much broader because it's happening with a different hat and a different name and a different shirt, perhaps. It's happening across the country. Let me show you one last small business owner, Max, and then I'm gonna jet. Can we show Ted Milner?
It's because of mergers in big business, our challenges happen when studios and networks streamline their vendors. If they choose to retain our services, they require us to do background checks with their own and operated background check company, with charges that's 3 times the amount of our current background checks. We're required to use their accounts payable company, and the annual fee is $6,000. They also take a percentage of each invoice before they pay us. So these are just some of the challenges of small business owners. You talked about people being quiet and that we can no longer be quiet today. The reason you don't see a lot of agencies is because they fear just that they will lose their business.
So when these massive conglomerates merge, they do what we were talking about earlier. They realize quote unquote synergies. They implement operational efficiencies by consolidating their back-end vendors. And what that means is they lay off half the vendors. All right, you're cutting costs. I get it. But, not really good for jobs, not good for the economy, but sure, you do you, right? But they also squeeze the remaining vendors by doing things like what Ted describes. Ted runs a temp agency. Projects in Hollywood are short term, right? Sometimes doesn't make sense to hire someone permanently when it's a 90-day project or it's a pilot, let's say, right? I'm not a huge fan of temps. I want people to get full-time jobs, permanently, but I understand the place this has in this industry, right? And so he's saying whenever these mergers happen, they say, hey, you doing background checks in your folks? You got to use our background check company. Oh, and that background check company will charge you 3 times what your background check provider does.
Because they're paying us, because they're owned by us, or they've got a contract with them.
Oh, no. In this instance, he said owned and operated by the conglomerate. So he says, you want to do invoices. You want your invoices paid? Oh, you're going to have to use our invoice provider. The fee for getting your invoices paid is $6,000 a year. And we're going to take a % off of every invoice that we pay you for the luxury of doing business with us. And Max, I say from one antitrust nerd to another, one Robinson Patman nerd to another, which is the Magna Carta of small business, 1936 antitrust law. This is what the A&P did. They would say, oh, we're so big, we're so bad. We'll pay the same price as everyone else. But if you want to sell to us, you got to use a broker. And it's actually not our broker, even though they're actually our employee and we own them. They're your broker. Oh, and you better pay your broker. This is what I guess monopsonists do, really, is they make people pay for the luxury of doing business with them, and they extract their monopsony rents. So, Max, I'm gonna roll. I have to jet for a family event, but I just want to say in closing 2 things. When you hear Paramount versus Warner Brothers, yes, you should think about censorship. Yes, you should think about the corruption, this weird bribery dinner held at the Donald Trump Institute of Peace in honor of the president, which the president and the attorney general both attended. That was held by Paramount, like blowing my mind ethics-wise. But you also need to think about Main Street. You need to think about the regular men and women who are about to get laid off, the small businesses that serve the industry directly or indirectly that are about to be put on the street. But here's the last thought I'll leave you with, which is that there is hope. The state attorneys general, according to Reuters, Attorney General Tom Bonta, Attorney General Tish James, 8 other state attorneys general, including, I believe, 2 Republican state attorneys general, according to Reuters, are poised to challenge this merger. The state attorneys general just won a huge victory in Ticketmaster. They just won a huge victory in Nexstar Tegna. There are 16 different ways this thing could be stopped. And so there is hope. This can be blocked. You should call your state attorney general, urge them to challenge this merger, because it's going to hurt all of us, not just the people who work in film and television in Los Angeles, New York, Atlanta, and beyond. It's going to hurt anyone who watches television and anyone who wants a Main Street that actually supports working people. So, Max, I'm going to go. I love you, man. Thank you all for listening. And we will stay apprised on this story, I guess.
All right. See you later, Alvaro. I'm going to just wrap it up here for people. I want to connect what we talked about in the beginning with the sports and the meaning of art. I don't know how we get ourselves out of this current environment where everything seems to be getting worse. Anybody who tries to tell us that things are getting better is clearly lying or is profiting off of the misery. But I do know that the only way we're going to get out of it is through reclaiming our humanity, and that happens through reclaiming our stories. So much social change has happened through what now they call content, right? People writing, people telling stories, people creating art. That is what shifts populations. It's what makes people remember that we are human and we have control over our own lives. So I encourage everybody not just to contact your attorney general. That is important, right? We do have to keep trying to use the political process as much as we can to try to make things better. But I encourage you to write a poem, tell a story, write a novel if you can. Make YouTube videos that are creative content. Do it not because you expect to get paid for it, but do it because you want to tell truth, because you want to have an impact on the way things are. On these podcasts before, I've talked about, my opinion. Most recently, I talked about it in the Cory Doctorow episode that we have, which I encourage you to check out, particularly if you're interested in AI and kind of how it's going to bring down our economy. I've talked about how I think people are starting to get more insular. I think that the current state of things where everything just seems awful, anything that, we want to do costs way too much money. The things that we have to do to live cost way too much money. And I think people are turning inward to their neighbors, to their local communities, and trying to find meaning as best they can through that. But all of us have a responsibility in this unprecedented time where technology and politics and concentrated wealth and power has corrupted pretty much everything of value in our lives. We all have a responsibility to contribute to the human experience through whatever way we can. I try to do it through this podcast and through rants on Twitter and whatever it may be. But all of you have a voice too. All of you have truth to tell. And the only way that we can beat these power structures is for us to share it with each other and not expect to be paid for it. So thank you, everyone, for joining the fair fight. Please check out the American Economics Liberty Project and this Main Street versus the merger town halls that they're doing. The next few are in New York City and Atlanta. You can register on the American Economics Liberty Project's website. And please check out our other videos on YouTube. You can check out our podcasts on Apple and Spotify. And if you have any thoughts on this show or, topics that you want us to discuss, feel free to give us a call. That's at 920-WE-FIGHT. That's 920-933-4448. Leave us a voicemail. Let us know what you're thinking. Please like and subscribe on the YouTube page, on our Twitter, which is at the Fair Fight Pod. I hope that you all have a wonderful Friday, and we look forward to seeing you next time on the fair fight.